What if the terrifying guilt keeping you awake at 3 a.m. isn't you losing your faith, but finally finding your soul? Your church calls your agonizing doubt spiritual treason. They lied. Watch until the end, because your horrifying rebellion is actually the violent, beautiful birth of your awakening. Imagine the exact moment your entire universe begins to collapse. It is 3 a.m. You are sitting alone in the heavy, suffocating silence of a dimly lit room, staring at the distorted shadows bleeding across the walls, feeling a visceral, terrifying weight crushing your chest. For your entire life, you have walked the straight, narrow line drawn in blood and dogma by your community, your church, your rigid spiritual masters. But right now, in the deafening quiet, a horrifying thought is tearing through the edges of your sanity. Am I losing my mind? Am I becoming a rebel, slipping quietly into the dark, unforgiving abyss of backsliding? You feel like a traitor. You feel like a stranger wearing a flesh mask in your own spiritual home, smiling at people whose language you no longer speak. The crushing guilt is eating you alive, whispering in the dark that your doubts are a demonic flirtation, a catastrophic failure of your soul. At Vuongguyen Quank 07 warmly welcomes you to a space where the unspoken truths are finally dragged into the light. If you are breathing heavily right now because you feel utterly exposed, if your soul is begging for answers that go beyond Sunday morning cliches, I urge you to hit that subscribe button right now. Your support fuels this channel, giving us the powerful motivation to keep creating these deeply revealing videos, bringing you the raw, unfiltered spiritual content you will not hear anywhere else. Look at the people around you in those perfectly padded pews. They sing the songs with closed eyes, they nod obediently at the sermons, they wear the uniform of the establishment flawlessly. Yet, inside, you are suffocating. You are starving while surrounded by a banquet that suddenly tastes like ash. You have been explicitly told that you are the problem, that your insatiable need to ask terrifying questions is an act of spiritual treason. But what if everything you have been conditioned to fear is a lie? What if I told you, looking you dead in the eye, that this agonizing disorientation is not the tragic death of your faith? It is the magnificent, bloody, undeniably beautiful prologue of your spiritual awakening. We are going to initiate a massive paradigm shift right here, right now. Let us violently strip away the suffocating cloak of conditioned religious guilt. You are not losing your salvation. You are experiencing something far more profound. You are graduating from structural religion. Think of a massive, ancient tree planted in a tiny, ceramic pot. Eventually, as the tree absorbs water and light, its roots will mercilessly crack the vessel that once held it. The tree is not malicious. It is not rebelling against the pot. It is simply doing what its creator intricately designed it to do. It is growing. You feel like the glitch in the system, the problem child in your congregation, entirely because your spiritual roots have violently slammed into the suffocating edges of their theological container. The institution demands absolute, stagnant uniformity, but your soul is screaming for the infinite. To the frightened institution, your expansion looks like dangerous rebellion. But to the divine architect of the universe, your so-called rebellion is the very first step toward genuine, unfiltered intimacy. Today, we are going to forge a brand new lens. We are about to walk through a rigorous, deeply exposing psychological and spiritual test. I am going to lay bare 10 definitive signs of a true, raw spiritual awakening that is currently hiding beneath the terrifying disguise of religious deconstruction. As we navigate this cinematic spectacle of the human soul together, I want you to be brutally honest with yourself and keep score. If you can truly identify with at least 5 of these 10 signs, let me assure you of the greatest truth you will hear today: you are not a rebel. You are not a heretic destined for the flames. You are on the exact, perfect path. You are simply waking up. If you are truly waking up, the first thing you will notice is how drastically your eyes process the world. You once accepted without question. The first sign of this awakening is the sudden, jarring realization that the spiritual food you are being fed no longer sustains you. You sit in the sanctuary, listening to the same pastor you have revered for years, but the words suddenly sound like a hollow echo. The sermons that used to bring you to tears now feel like carefully orchestrated performances designed to manipulate your emotions rather than nourish your soul. You are not becoming cynical, your spiritual palate has simply matured. You are craving the meat of divine truth, but you are continually being handed the watered-down milk of institutional survival. This inevitably leads you to the second sign, a visceral, almost physical allergy to fear-based theology. For decades, your relationship with the divine was likely held together by a quiet, lingering terror. You obeyed, you served, and you tithed because, deep down, you were terrified of a God who operated like a temperamental, cosmic dictator. But now, the very concept of a divine creator demanding your love under the threat of eternal torment makes your stomach turn. You begin to realize that perfect love casts out fear, and the religion you were handed is absolutely saturated in it. You are not rejecting God, you are rejecting a grotesque caricature of God drawn by men who needed to keep you compliant. As this fear loses its grip on your throat, you will encounter the third sign, the complete disintegration of the us versus them mentality. Structural religion thrives on boundaries. It demands a clear demarcation between the holy insiders and the wicked outsiders. You were taught to view the rest of humanity as a project, a target for conversion, or a cautionary tale. But as you awaken, those artificial walls come crashing down. You look at the people your church warned you about, the outcasts, the marginalized, the secular, and you do not see enemies or pity cases. You see your brothers and sisters. You see reflections of the divine image breathing and walking through the grit of ordinary life. This realization is incredibly beautiful, but it immediately alienates you from your religious peers. You can no longer participate in their holy huddles, gossiping disguised as prayer requests, because your heart has violently expanded beyond the borders of their exclusive club. As the walls of that tribal mentality crumble, you inevitably find yourself walking alone into a vast, terrifying desert. This brings us to the fourth sign of your awakening, the painful, deafening silence of your prayer life. There was a time when you had all the formulas memorized. You knew exactly what to say, how to bow your head, and what tone of voice to use to feel connected to the heavens. But now, when you close your eyes, the old scripts feel completely dead on your tongue. You might go days, weeks, or even months without praying in the traditional sense, and a religious person would call this backsliding. In truth, you have simply outgrown the need to treat God like a vending machine. Your silence is not a lack of faith, it is a profound surrender. You are learning to sit in the quiet mystery of the divine presence without needing to fill the space with your demands or theological buzzwords. Navigating this silence triggers the fifth, and perhaps the most agonizing sign, the profound grief of outgrowing your spiritual tribe. No one warns you about the sheer, physical heartache of religious deconstruction. You begin to lose your community. The friends who once stood beside you in the trenches of ministry suddenly look at you with suspicion and pity. They whisper that you are losing your way, that you have been deceived by the culture. You desperately want to explain the beautiful freedom you are finding, but every time you open your mouth, they shut you down with a rehearsed Bible verse. The loneliness of this stage is absolutely crushing. You mourn the loss of the certainty and the belonging you once had. It is a true death, and you must allow yourself to grieve the funeral of your former worldview. Yet, right in the middle of that mourning, the sixth sign emerges as a beacon in the dark, a magnetic, undeniable pull toward mystery over certainty. Your entire life, you were taught that absolute certainty was the ultimate measure of strong faith. You were handed a perfectly bound book of answers and told that questioning the text was a direct insult to the Creator. But now, the answers feel incredibly cheap, while the questions feel deeply sacred. You begin to find comfort in saying, "I do not know." You realize that a God small enough to be perfectly explained by a theological textbook is not a God big enough to create the cosmos. You are no longer afraid of the gray areas, you are learning to pitch your tent in the magnificent unknown. Yet, in the very heart of this barren wilderness, a beautiful, unexpected transformation begins to take root in your chest. The seventh sign of your spiritual graduation is the emergence of a radical, unfiltered empathy that shatters everything you were previously taught about morality. In the past, your compassion was likely conditional, tied heavily to whether or not someone agreed with your doctrines or lived up to your community's standards of purity. Now, your heart simply breaks for human suffering, period. You find yourself fiercely defending the very people you once judged. You realize that true righteousness has absolutely nothing to do with policing other people's behaviors and everything to do with mourning with those who mourn. You are no longer obsessed with who is right and who is wrong, you are obsessed with who is broken and how you can pour love into their wounds. Your theology has moved from your head to your hands. This profound softening of your heart paves the way for the eighth sign, discovering the undeniable presence of the divine in the secular world. When you were trapped in the institution, you believed God only showed up on Sunday mornings, confined to the space between the pulpit and the altar, activated only by acoustic guitars and fog machines. But as your roots break the pot, the entire world becomes a sacred cathedral. You begin to feel the overwhelming presence of the Creator in the quiet rustle of the trees in your backyard, in the brilliant strokes of a secular painting, in the lyrics of a song that has nothing to do with religion, and in the tear-stained face of a stranger on the subway. The dividing line between the sacred and the secular completely evaporates. You realize God is not hiding in a church building waiting for you to visit once a week. The divine is bleeding through every single atom of the universe, and for the first time in your life, your eyes are actually open enough to see it. You do not need a priest or a pastor to mediate your connection to the source of life anymore, because you are walking barefoot on holy ground every single day, everywhere you go. When the entire world becomes a sanctuary, you realize that the destination was never a physical place, but a state of absolute inner liberation. This brings you to the ninth sign, the complete and utter death of performance anxiety. For years, you carried the exhausting, invisible backpack of religious performance. You were constantly monitoring your thoughts, your words, and your actions, terrified of slipping up and losing your standing with God or your community. You lived on a spiritual treadmill, running until your lungs burned, trying to earn a grace that you were told was free but always felt like it came with a massive list of terms and conditions. Today, that treadmill is unplugged. You finally understand that you are inherently worthy of love exactly as you are, deeply flawed and entirely human. You no longer need to prove your holiness to anyone. The frantic need to perform, to serve on every committee, to be the perfect believer, simply vanishes, replaced by a quiet, steady rhythm of authentic living. This leads us to the 10th and final sign, the ultimate validation that you have not lost your mind, but rather found your soul, a profound, unshakable inner peace amidst unresolved questions. The storm of religious deconstruction is violent. It tears the roof off your house and shatters your windows. But as the dust settles, you look around at the ruins of your former beliefs, and instead of panic, you feel a deep, resonant stillness. You still do not have all the answers. You might not even know what you believe about the afterlife, about the specifics of the holy texts, or about the exact nature of God. But for the very first time, the not knowing does not terrify you. You have traded the brittle, fragile certainty of dogma for the flexible, enduring strength of true faith. Look at your score. If you recognized yourself in at least 5 of these 10 signs, take a deep, trembling breath and let the suffocating weight fall off your shoulders right now. You are not a disappointment. You are not a backslider. You are a brave, relentless seeker who had the courage to follow the truth, even when it meant walking into the dark alone. The terrifying disorientation you are feeling is simply the vertigo of finally standing up after a lifetime of crawling. Welcome to the wilderness. Welcome to the mystery. Welcome to the beautiful, unfiltered reality of your own magnificent spiritual awakening. You are exactly where you are supposed to be. The journey of spiritual awakening is not a path of losing your faith, but rather a profound shedding of the artificial constraints that once bound it. As you outgrow the confines of rigid, fear-based institutional religion, you step into a vast and sometimes isolating wilderness. This transition is marked by the painful loss of your former spiritual tribe and the uncomfortable silence that replaces rehearsed, formulaic prayers. However, this wilderness is not barren, it is the birthplace of genuine liberation. By relinquishing the desperate need for absolute certainty and stepping off the exhausting treadmill of religious performance, you make room for a radical, unfiltered empathy that extends far beyond the walls of any church. The us versus them mentality dissolves, revealing a world where the sacred and the secular intertwine effortlessly. You begin to recognize the divine presence in ordinary moments, everyday people, and the quiet stillness of your own heart. Ultimately, this spiritual graduation leads to an unshakable inner peace. You learn to embrace the magnificent mystery of the unknown, trusting that true connection to the Creator does not require perfectly memorized doctrines or the approval of a religious community. It requires only an open heart, a willingness to mourn with those who mourn, and the courage to stand authentically in your own truth. This deconstruction is not a tragic end, but a beautiful, liberating beginning to a faith that is deeply rooted, unconditionally loving, and fiercely alive. True spiritual maturity is found not in the rigid accumulation of absolute answers, but in the peaceful acceptance of life's mysteries and the active practice of unconditional compassion. When we stop trying to manage our spiritual image and cease trying to control others through dogma, we free ourselves to experience genuine, unfiltered connection with both the divine and humanity. Stop measuring your spiritual worth by how perfectly you perform or how strictly you adhere to an institution's rules. Today, consciously choose to embrace the gray areas of your life. If you are struggling with doubts, allow yourself to sit in the quiet without frantically searching for a textbook answer. Shift your daily focus away from judging who is right or wrong and instead look for practical ways to pour love into the brokenness around you. Practice finding the sacred in the ordinary, take a mindful walk, listen to the wind, or share a moment of genuine empathy with a stranger, recognizing that these simple acts are profoundly holy. Which of the signs of spiritual awakening mentioned today resonated with you the most? Please take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments section below so our community can learn from your perspective. If you found value in this message, please subscribe to the channel. Your support gives us the motivation to keep creating more meaningful and thought-provoking content for you.